Hi Decoders, this week we are talking about prayer and why this is such a sweet but still deeply questioned aspect of our spiritual life. Hi, I'm Kiran Trace. Welcome to Humans Decoded, a story of hobbits, fairies, elves, dwarfs, gnomes, and humans. If you get lost at any point, there is a deep dive on all the different avatars in episode 1. It includes notes. Thank you for joining us in a fun little chat about the vast potential of our human makeup. Hi Leela, hi Cami.
Hi girls, hi Decoders.
Hi gang.
You know, I'm so excited to talk about this here at the beginning of 2026 because I love that all of us as a community, all the Decoders, can really bring in an aspect of prayer that we could weave through 2026. Of course, if this episode is going to resonate for you guys Decoders, but I like that offering, and I think it's really easy for us to underestimate the power of prayer. In that underestimation, sometimes we can just fall into practices by rote without really inhabiting and embodying the power that the prayer could offer us. Like maybe some of you guys grew up with a formal type of prayer, maybe mantra chanting, you know, like the finding a beautiful, Sanskrit phrase and it gets chanted and chanted, or maybe some message from a sat guru, or maybe you grew up in a Buddhist household. The may all beings have peace is just a way that you end your day, or you sort of end interactions with people. Or maybe it's a Christian tradition and you hold your hands together in that namaste shape and you sit on your knees at the bed and you just send love to the people you want. Or, we've got lots of people who have sort of various like good witch kind of rituals where you have a smudge and whatever it is, say intentions or something like this. But we can easily fall into these practices as a kind of a default, hope this catches me, hope this works. I'm just going to keep it in my like good hygiene, next to good hygiene checklist. And in the opposite side of the camp, also we can have this non-duality crew. And, Decoders, that's really the camp where Cami and Leela and I sit. So non-duality is this term that points to original nature. It's this path that doesn't include duality. There's no good, there's no bad, there's no holy, there's no evil. It focuses instead on the present moment, and the depth of that present moment is without a story, without judgment. It simply is what is. And there's a knowledge behind that everything that is one vast and powerful intelligence. And in its essence, that's a kind of a definition of non-duality, no non-dual, no differences, no polarities. Unlike spirituality, which tends to have duality, it tends to focus on sacred versus non-sacred, secular, and evil or bad versus good and kind and harmonious. So what I think is really going to be fun to crack open with you guys in today's episode is the actual power of transformation that prayer holds. Whether that's spirituality, non-duality, there's still a call for prayer, even when all that is a vast intelligence.
Yes, it's so juicy, and I love that prayer isn't getting left behind even in the non-duality camp.
And what a great definition, once again, pulling out the big guns of like the definition of non-duality versus spirituality. It's like chef's kiss. Love it, love it, love it. So succinct, so to the point. And prayer. Yeah, when I hear it, it's very easy to, as you said, disregard it a little bit as this old-fashioned superstition for, older people who go to church. But at the same time, also when I hear prayer, I think of how I grew up with prayer being an every night ritual, quite sweet. Like mom and dad prayed with us, these little kids' prayers, and there was something nourishing and something soothing in it for me. And still to this day, I feel it in my belly, like, oh, a warm hug. And over the years, working with you, Kiran, and taking the classes over and over again, I sort of came to discover anew how much power words can hold when you speak them out loud into the vast intelligence. Like, obviously, as a kid, I never knew that. I never realized it. And then it's not coming from a place of I want something or I need something, but just these words spoken from awareness into awareness. So revisiting prayer today at the top of 2026, I'm just seeing that there's so much more aliveness in it than what we might think.
I feel like I was always quite devotional. I remember my first earnest prayer. I think it's actually one of my first ever memories, but it's being 3 years old on a swing and just singing songs about God. And I grew up in a Catholic culture. We weren't practicing Catholics per se, just sort of like a nice washing of guilt and shame, as you would growing in a kind of Catholic country. And so we used to have bedside prayers in Spanish, and one of them was Ángel de la guarda, dulce compañía, no me desampares ni de noche ni de día. And it was cute. It was like a nice ritual of being tucked into bed. But what I think I actually found for myself was just this thirst for God from being, yay small. And I remember being on the swing and making songs up about God. I remember we were like on this road trip at night, and maybe I was 5, I don't know, in the back seat, kind of head hanging out the window, looking at the stars, being like, God, can I meet you? Can I meet you by Christmas? Please, please, can I meet you?
Wow.
For me, when I think of prayer in its truest power, and kind of as Leila was saying, it can be in the words, but only if the words are coming from an aligned place. A lot of us are out of alignment and just doing mind prayers, and then the words have no power. But if I was to strip it down into its most powerful movement, I would say it's the on your knees moment where you find it. It's where our humanity feels so fragile and our heartbreak is so overwhelming that we come face to face with what is an organic call to prayer. This is a call that's stripped of any ritual, so to speak, or habit or playfulness, really. In our classes, we lead with a tool that I found in my moments on my knees. We talk about it here in the podcast a lot as truth statements. You guys hear us say, like, the truth. What is the truth? It's when our mind and our beliefs, they catch us up and we get closed in by those thoughts, that despair, the anguish, the depression, the anxiety, the grasping. And in that place, we're kind of cornered in a dark place. And that's the place that we absolutely need to know what's true. And not relatively true, but absolutely true. Like, because the absolute will cover the relative. So truth statements. And now we use those as a regular tool in our classes and such because they're a form of prayer. It's just stripped out of all of the ritual. But ultimately, it's still a call to remember what's possible, right? It's this calling out, like, God, can I meet you? Or like it's a calling out to remember what's possible. And the energy of life is infinite. And in that call, something in our being, in our field, in our soul, whatever you want to call it, remembers that we can fight for evolution instead of limitations. A reminder that truth isn't created in our minds. It's not created from our worldview. It's I find it very uplifting to remember that about truth.
How delicious to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's share some of those on our knees prayer moments, shall we?
Oof. I think one of the most earnest requests or desires that came out in the form of ritual was during one of the Muji retreats. And towards the end of the retreat, there was this bonfire, and it was a form of prayer. So we got papers to write down whatever it is you most desire, and you could put it in the fire, kind of like throwing a coin into a fountain and making a wish. But he called it the fire of truth, like a white fire that burns everything. And I must have been feeling very ballsy, but my wish was to take all of it, all of me, every ounce of separate self, like just take it all and put it in the fire, meaning my suffering, my struggle, my fight, basically all of my identity, but even my likes and dislikes, like anything kami, it felt very brazen, like absolutely everything that is believed as this separate identity, take all of it, burn it, let only source remain. And I think in those days I didn't know, I was like, put Cami in the fire, erase all traces of her. But I didn't know that what you'd get back is actually like the real essence of Cami, with likes and dislikes and very specific preferences and like quite a yummy quality. I kind of thought she had to entirely die. But I often think back to that moment these days, and I feel like I know I'm here because of her, because of that moment of fervent prayer. It really feels that way.
It's beautiful, really beautiful.
I think my strongest on my knees prayer moment was after my ex-partner died, and I was on my knees, kind of just left with this big, huge, what the actual fuck? Like, are you kidding me? Life, God. And I felt completely defeated. Like Kiran said before, like when you're cornered in a dark corner, like I was so with my back against the wall of like, really? For real? And it felt like nothing, I was 32 years old at the time, and it felt like nothing I've done so far had any, how to say, any meaning or any value, or it's like I have no idea how this whole thing should work, and it was such a huge pain that it felt like I can't bear it. There's nothing left for me but to kind of give up. But it was a giving up that was it wasn't quiet. It was very angry. It was quite loud. It was quite there was a lot of rage against God as well. And the story that comes to mind for me is the story of Job, this guy in the Old Testament in the Bible that was tested by God and the devil because they made a bet and to see like how strong is Job's faith really. We don't have to go into the details of the story, but everything Job had was taken away from him, and he was, he was accepting it with, I don't know, he was very quiet about it, but I didn't I wasn't like holding my head down, docile. And inside of me, there was this raging flame of like, what does this mean? Like, if life can include that everything's taken away from you, then what is life? Like, what's the truth here? I want to know what's behind all this and why and how. And I was sort of screaming this question, which was my prayer, into the world. And I wrote to all kinds of enlightened, quote unquote, enlightened people. I was like, okay, so if you're enlightened, tell me. Please tell me, what is this? And I got into fights with some of them because I remember one of them writing back and saying, like, don't look to me, look inside of you. And yes, I get it now, but at the time it made me so angry. I was like, hated him so much. And I think I've said it here before. I always wanted to know what's true since I arrived in this lifetime, but I never had much interest in enlightenment per se, I'd say. But then after Christopher, my ex-partner, died, I was like, okay, so now, like, bring it on. Like, let me really see reality and truth, please God, or else I'm out. Like, what's left for me to play with in a way? And I really love how you say, Cami, that sometimes you look back at this moment and you know you're here because of that. And yeah, totally, yeah, I feel so true for me as well. Like, my loud, ugly, messy, raging prayer is what brought me here. Thank God.
Yeah. Very dearly. Thank you, God. Like, very truly.
Yes.
Maybe we'll put a little trigger warning here. If we have little people listening, they could put some headphones on, or we could just pause for a second and get them distracted in another room. And so I think it's so beautiful and valuable to remember the on your knees moments. And every one of us decoders have been there again and again and again. And in some ways, it's really hard for me to reflect on those prayer moments because there were just so many. Even now, it's just, even just hearing you guys, like, like it brings us to tears. And there's just so many moments that I was at the end of my rope where life kind of closed in on me. And it kind of felt like it was the end of the road. Like you're saying, like, why am I even here? What is this even about? And then I'd find myself in this deep, deep, deep grip, like a begging posture with life. Show me a way forward, because I cannot see the option. I don't know where that is. And I will say in reflection that I feel very sorry that I had to be on my knees so much before I turned or understood the real power of prayer. And I guess that's why we're doing this episode, and we're here at the top of 2026 saying, there's so much valuable in there. There's so much valuable power in prayer. I wasn't raised in an environment with prayer. I wasn't conscious of what prayer was. It was just that I found myself in so many dark corners of existence. I think of this one moment that really highlights it for me. And it was really my first real serious suicide attempt. I was becoming conscious of the extreme violence and sexual assault that had been done to me. And it's kind of hard to describe what happened, but there was a moment, just like a light bulb where consciousness and awareness clicked in and everything got seen. Prior to that, I didn't have memories. My body buried the details and my mind had like no recall. Like, if you met me in college and you asked me who my best friend in grade 10 was, I couldn't tell you. I don't remember. I don't remember anything in my life. as a kind of a mercy was going on. But there was a moment where it shifted. It was a moment, and I was in my early 20s, and there was this sudden awareness, this light clicks on, and I saw what happened. It was just all there. And it was catastrophic to my nervous system. It was like, I can't take it. And it genuinely felt like I cannot survive becoming aware of what has happened to me. And yeah, I had to get out. There had to be somewhere else. And I was so methodical in my process. I lived in Alaska at the time. So I had this really solid plan. I was just going to drive my truck off of a cliff in the frozen water. Easy. People died in Alaska. People still die in Alaska from that all the time. It's really common. So that was the plan. That was the only way I could see to get out. And I think, though, that all the while I was planning it, in the background, there was a part of my soul, a part of my consciousness that was praying, like, show me the way forward. And, I didn't know that. I didn't know where the intervention was going to come from. My story was a cliff and a frozen lake. But it was, in fact, a very sweet friend who sort of stopped me on the street. Casual run into her. And she said something to me, and I tell this to people all the time. She said, check your assumption of death. And, I think we ran into each other in the street, and I was sort of like, I'm off. You might not actually see me again. I'm not sure I'm coming back. Don't worry. But she saw something there. She's a nurse practitioner. She saw the signs pretty quick. And she just said that very, very simple movement. Check your assumption about death. I would love to imagine that it's a wonderful place, but if it's not, you don't get a redo. So, in a way, in a subtext, she was saying, make sure this really is the only option forward, because you don't know what happens next. And in that subtext was like, because what if it gets worse? What if you think that's the next step, but it's worse? And I was already in a catastrophic place. So that check your assumption, it could get worse, was like, damn, and it kind of broke that trance of where I thought a solution was in my head. But in a way, there was a prayer, like the same as Cammie's prayer, the same as your prayer, Leela. It's the same prayer, right? It was like, please strip me of everything I've ever known. Please, this life of pure pain and unbelievable violence and abuse and trauma, instability, lack of consciousness, strip it all from me. Can you give me a fresh breath? Can I just have this one free moment to start again? That's the call. That's the prayer. And, instead of driving off a cliff, I drove to a friend's house. It was subconscious. I was as surprised as anyone to find myself in her driveway. She had this cottage, this tiny, tiny, tiny cottage, maybe like 150 square feet, not much bigger than an actual bed. And I had no clothes with me, just what I was wearing to drive off the cliff, this pair of very baggy track pants and a t-shirt. I didn't even have shoes on. It was the winter in Alaska. But, I lived in that cottage for weeks, and a book was brought to me. It was found very soon, and it was called The Courage to Heal. It was this beautiful, beautiful book about survivors of sexual violence. And a very clear process of how they could reclaim their lives. And decoders, even as I'm talking and crying with you now, I can feel a prayer in my being of such gratitude and thanks to the women who wrote that book and the survivors in that book. It's like singing out of my heart to shower them with gratitude and grace, like, and I did get to meet the author of that book, one of the authors, many years later. I did thank her, but I can't thank her enough. And in this moment, more prayers of gratitude to her. And, just on my knees, screaming for an interception, screaming for resets. And it's immediately provided, immediately there's support. And, so many decades later and so many more on my knees moments, I know this to be true. Prayer is answered. As the three of us are so echoing here, true prayer, this thing that just sings out your heart unstoppably. And you can feel the power of it, it is met and supported. And when I pulled up to my friend's house that day with bare feet in the Alaskan winter in the snow, they had this pair of shoes at the door. It's just like a spare pair of shoes. Everybody was being very gentle with me. They didn't want to trigger anything. And she's a very, very gentle soul, sweet Jetty. Anyways, she just gave me this pair of shoes, and they were Fluvogs. They look like penny loafers. It's a Canadian brand. And on the bottom of them, they had these, it was a series of shoes called angelic souls. Like the bottom rubber of the shoe, the sole, they were angelic souls. And they literally written on them, they were like, "We're here to support you." And there was these pictures of little angels embedded in the soles. These John Fluvog shoes. They were at the door. She just passed them to me. So I wore those shoes for weeks, and I read this book, and I would, go for these little walks late at night when the world was asleep, and I would order wonton soup from the Chinese all-night restaurant. Soup, angelic souls, a quiet space, and a book. And that's how I found my way back to life. That's about the end of the trigger warning. Little people can come back.
Gosh, what a testimony to the power of prayer.
We're also grateful for that moment.
I find that there needs to be, maybe not even consciously, but some, like at least a hair width of space to see in the moments when it's not, acute trauma or pain, just that hair width of space to see that there's something at work that isn't true. Like something at work that is a belief system, a pain body, or a habit. Because if I don't see that there is this thing at work, right? I wouldn't say, "Here, God, please, you take this. I can't." So there needs to be some awareness of it. Otherwise, I'm identified. I'm like, no, there's nothing here. Like, what would I pray for? So that's definitely something that can be a challenge, to see it, that there is this gremlin, as we sometimes call it, at play. Because at times, and we've talked about it in a previous episode, we're very comfortable being in this sort of gremlin-y position, right? Like, I don't want to leave it. I don't want to be not this pain body gremlin thing, even though it's not comfortable. Or it can be very uncomfortable. There's like a familiarity to it. Like, I know this place and I know myself here. So separate self has very little interest to leave the known for the unknown. And we can spend lifetimes indulging this familiar gremlin comfort zone. For instance, it can feel very comfortable to stay in the position of in my case, oh, I can't do this or that. I'm a widow. Like, I'm a victim of my circumstances. Clearly, life has treated me so unfairly. Like, how dare you ask anything of me? That would be a pain body comfort zone. And as opposed to see from awareness, the little bit uncomfortable truth of actually there is a lot of agency here. Like, I have a lot of, I want to say, like, room to make choices. I'm free. And in no way do I need to keep indulging the not capable or victim story, but I can put both feet in reality and witness life from over here. So it can take a moment to get to this place where there's enough willingness to actually turn around and look at the belief system, the gremlin, the pain body at play. Because, like I said, it's a bit uncomfortable. And when there's active trauma in a system, no way. It just needs a moment to calm and feel safe enough again.
Yeah, I would say it takes a lot of courage to turn away from that, my precious, which you kind of are very familiar with and you know yourself to be.
Mm.
And yeah, this gremlin that you described, that's, I would say, how I experience it as well. And when my identities or habits or beliefs are really making a play for themselves, they'll have me believe that suffering is like the default. Suffering is what the game is, and it will be like this forever. So in those times, it's very hard to feel like life is actually benevolent, and that is in actual fact more true. So it can feel like I'm not even worthy to ask because, life is struggle. Like, I am not worthy of anything but this, like, fight. And recently I had this delicious yes to go to London. And delicious yes is when, like, your whole body is just singing in aliveness, like, yes, this is the way, like, this is what we want to do. And it was to go and see this exhibition in London, which is a couple hours train ride for me. And it was the very last day that the exhibition was on. And I also wanted to combine it to see one of my best friends and her family right before Christmas. And it was just completely lit up in my body. But at the same time, it was so hard to open my hands and let go. Because at the time I had this painting commission that was due. And I was supposed to be working on it that day, not, going to London and having a jolly great time. And so the controller gremlin wanted me to be like, are you fucking crazy? You gotta paint. You're not going anywhere. And I think really, by the grace of God, I just found enough courage to book a train and go that same day, even with all this pressure of, you have to finish the painting today. And you know what? The whole trip was just blessings, blessings, and blessings. It was the most incredible day out, and the act of being at the exhibition actually felt like a type of prayer because I was being infused with all this beautiful inspiration. Like, I didn't even realize it, but I was surrounded by my favorite artists. So lots of people I follow on Instagram or I'd taken their courses, like they all had paintings and I got to see them in real life. And it felt like being amongst all this incredible art and my contemporaries, the kind of artist I want to be one day. It felt like, oh, this is home. Like, this is just where I'm meant to be. It showed me where the bar is and what I'd like to head for. So it just completely infused me with inspiration. And it was just so replenishing. Like, my cup was fulleth. I know inevitably it fed back into my painting commission for sure.
When I first moved to the village I live in now, right at the border to Italy, I was sat in front of the church on the phone with you, Kiran, and the church bells rang, and I was saying to you, like, the peace and the silence here, it's so thick, it's almost palpable. And so, like, what you're saying, Cami, of being infused with all this inspiration, it felt like I was steeping in this possibility of just so much peace and so much quiet that felt like it was this steeping in it, this like being infused completely in a way, like permeated, penetrated. It was opening or smoothing out all the pathways that were a little crooked before inside of my system, a little blocked before. And I guess it opened up a lot more space for more peace and quiet. So yeah, I when you talk about your day at the exhibition in London, that comes to mind for me. It's just a very different kind of prayer, isn't it?
Yeah, prayer doesn't have to have a form, a ritual, or a posture. It's just the simple act of inviting the intervention or the inviting the up level, inviting the healing, inviting the help. And it's not coming from our mind, and recognizing the difference of that. It's not coming from a hide, a run, or an avoid mentally. It's coming from this deep yearning in our being that's yearning all the time in all kinds of moments. And listening to that, hearing that, and letting it speak out to itself. And I think just like what we're all saying here, rinsing the awareness in inspiration, drenching in a possibility, letting that be inspiring, letting that aspirational example be provided instead of collapsing away from it. Actually articulating that yearning. And then that's a lot of deep digging for clarity and deep digging to speak it out. Even to the room, I always say it to the room, say it to the sky, say it to your idea of creator, God, infinite field of all, whatever is true for you. It's a risk. It's a risk to step out into that field of faith instead of indulging our fear. And my own definition of faith is something that you know, something that's repeatable. Like every time I sit to meditate, right there is that quietness. Right there is a field. I know it's there. It's repeatable. It's present. So I can have faith that when I sit to meditate, it's there. Whether it's being recognized or not, I have the faith that it's there. And then I can pray to get to know more of the depth available. I feel like I just want to say, sidebar, I really don't recommend praying to invite entities or gods or angelic beings into your field. I think that might be a little bit of a bypass of your own consciousness and your own connection. You are an aspect of the whole. You know, you are not that separate. And, you know, you can call me out on this as you need, but the call is inside of you and the answer is inside of you. The same beautiful vastness that you are will respond. And generally, I don't recommend people opening up to things they don't know exactly how to exit from. Like, so keep it simple. No intermediaries are needed here. As the three of us have said, you know, you ask and it is provided.
So put your hand up if you've shed a tear so far. Mine would definitely be up. And I think partly what's kind of hitting me in the feels is just this affirmation that everything is so precious and good. Actually, despite what all the gremlins want to say. And I just want to share the second part of my London trip was, you know, going to see my friend and her family and her 2 kids. And supposedly I was, you know, going to stop in and go back to Bristol that same day so I could paint. But then I arrived and they opened the door and the tree was sparkling, and they had the most beautiful music on. Her husband was making dinner, so these gorgeous smells were wafting in. The kids were like waiting with big smiles for me to put decorations on the tree. I mean, the only thing that was missing was like the hallelujah music in the background. Like, it was just such a scene. And so much so that I just burst into tears. And I had to run into the next room and have a CW, which is like it's called a compassionate witness call, and it's a little listening exercise that we do with one of our class buddies. But the thing that was like such an affront to this beautiful scene was this gremlin that was so convinced, I don't deserve this. I should be painting. Like, what am I doing here? So after my little listening exercise call, it was kind of feeling into it. And it was like, I think it's safe. I think it's okay to just trust that this strikingly beautiful moment is where I'm meant to be. Mm. And so it's kind of coming back to that point that sometimes it's hard to accept that life is benevolent. And in the end, I ended up staying the night because it was just so delicious. There was no point in going back. And it was just such a nourishing, delicious, 24 hours. These little kids were just delicious. I got full of hugs and beautiful music and Christmas ornaments. And it was just so yummy. So that's the feeling, the waves that keep kind of rippling, that sort of shatter the gremlin's illusion that actually life is so kind. And if you don't feel it, pray it.
Oh my God, I feel like for however long we're recording, I'm sitting in just prayer. This episode, it is a prayer in itself. It's it's everything.
We hope it feels like that for you as well, decoders. And, we're wishing you the most glorious beginning of 2026. And we're going to be with you here along the road, and looking forward to all of you that want to come and join class. And, we always start the year with embodiment, where we we excavate down and find those deeper prayers. The registration for embodiment opens on January 16th, and it's only open for 1 week. You've got 1 week to get your seat. But we are going to do a live hang on January 17th, which is a Saturday. We're going to, just have a live chat, probably have a bit of a meditation, answer any cues. There's a link in the show notes if you're wanting to join us for that hang. If you're interested in taking embodiment and it's your very first time, how exciting and delicious and wonderful that is. There's a link here in the show notes to join a wait list so that as soon as the doors open, you'll get an email from us. But you guys, decoders listening, and it's your second, your third, your sixth, your eighth time taking class, you're just going to get an email from us. Sending all our love. Bye.
Bye.
Happy 2026, decoders. Bye.
Thank you for listening. We obviously love hearing what you think. Your feedback helps us make a better show for you to listen to. So feel free to comment, and you can do it at Facebook, which is the Humans Decoded podcast. And if you're not on social, you can always email any questions to us at outreach@kirantrace.com. And thanks for listening. We love you.